Welcome to Bilingual Book Buddies. Bilingual Book Buddies is dedicated to promoting bilingual books for children and sharing insights from authors, illustrators, editors, agents, and anyone involved in bringing these stories to life. I'm Claudia Sloan. I'm one of three co-hosts of Bilingual Book Buddies. I'm an artist who also writes and illustrates books for children. I have three books of my own published, and one of them was a collaboration with the Phoenix Suns and the Phoenix Mercury professional basketball teams, and signed copies are available exclusively at my website. And now let's welcome my co-host, Alicia Salazar. And Silvia Lopez normally is here with us, but she is under the weather today, so we will be missing her. So Alicia, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, thank you. I'm Alicia Salazar, children's book author and former teacher. I've written bilingual and English language books for young readers, including the Camila the Star series, Trolls, Loch Ness Monster, and the picture book Cascarones and Easter Surprise. I'm passionate about stories that celebrate culture, spark imagination, and encourage kids to express themselves, especially in more than one language.
And now I have the pleasure to welcome our special guest today, author Nydia Armendia-Sanchez. Nydia is a children's book author based in California. Her books include Not Far From Here, Frida Kahlo's Flower Crown, and the forthcoming picture books The Women Before Us and Vroom, Vroom, Vámonos, and Desert Cantos, the story of Linda Ronstadt. Nydia was awarded the Sustainable Arts Foundation Illustrated Children's Book Award and received an honorable mention for the International Latino Book Awards. Her storytelling is inspiring, and it was inspired by her children as well as as well as his Guatemalan and Basque roots. Nydia strives for exclusivity and diversity in all her creative endeavors. Welcome, Nydia.
Thank you for having me today, Claudia and Alicia.
Thank you for being here with
We're,
us today. We're
Yes,
excited
thank
to
you.
have you.
Thank you. Excited to join you here at Bilingual Book Buddies.
Yay. Well, let's start at the beginning. Tell us about your author journey. How did you get started writing books for children, and how did you get published for the first time?
I would say that my journey has been somewhat of a winding, twisting road. I did not discover writing or writing for children until much later in life. When I was young, I wanted to be an artist, either a painter or illustrator, something like that. But life took me down a different path, and once I had kids and I started looking for books for them that reflected our culture, that reflected our use of the heritage language in the home, I wasn't finding a whole lot. And so I just started writing for them, for fun, just writing stories, which, of course, again, at the time, I had no idea what the process was to create an actual children's book. So I just wrote things that, would be interesting to them. And right before the pandemic, I thought to myself, well, what does it actually take to become a children's author? And I took a class, it was like the week before the world shut down. So it was in March of 2020. I took a class at UCLA, just an intro class on writing for children, and I really, really enjoyed the class. And I thought, I wonder what else there is to this. And of course, then as the world shut down, we all had a lot of time on our hands, and I just started taking classes remotely. That opened up to everyone, so we were able to take classes from all different types of organizations wherever they were located, and really kind of sparked an interest. And usually, when I find something I like, I kind of dive head first and just really dedicate myself to trying to acquire and develop those skills. And I wrote the first one, which is Not Far From Here, which really was just kind of a love letter to my kids and wanting to share how their father had migrated. And, I'm first generation Latina, so my grandparents on both sides and my parents, they've all migrated here to the United States. And so it was really a story about our family story and our family history that I wanted to convey to them. At the same time, I wrote about Frida again during the pandemic. I saw like a portrait of her, and I was just wondering, how her flower crown came to be. She was someone that I had looked up to ever since I was a child. So there had been that kind of lifelong interest in her. Again, I just kind of wrote it, and then I wrote one more, which was like a really fun story. And with that, with those three stories, I entered a contest via the Sustainable Arts Foundation. And I won. I won a $5,000 unrestricted cash prize for parents who were creatives. And that really kind of validated that, maybe there was something there. And then with that, I started to try to find an agent and, sent out queries. I just cold queried, anyone who maybe fit into like what I was looking for, someone who would uplift diverse voices and things like that. And that's it, found my agent. We went on submission and we got the first offer for Not Far From Here, and then that turned into a two-book deal with Candlewick. So they picked up Not Far From Here and The Women Before Us, which is releasing this year.
That's awesome. I feel like the pandemic changed all of our lives, like turned all of our lives upside down
Absolutely.
and in different ways for everybody.
Yeah.
And it's really great to hear that it turned your life, changed your life for the better. Like you've answered this a little bit, but still, I think there's a little add-on question that might dig deeper. Um, what inspired you to write bilingual children's books? And is there something that bilingual storytelling allows you to express that monolingual storytelling perhaps can't?
Yeah, so it's funny because some of the books I've written are all in English. For example, Frida Kahlo's Flower Crown, just when I wrote it, it just came out in English. So I'm like an intuitive writer, or a pantser, if you will. So I kind of write based on feeling. And, with that one, it just came out in English. With, my family story, that was, a translanguaging type text where I go back and forth between Spanish and English. And mainly that's because that's how we speak in my home. My husband, well, my first language was Spanish. So when I started preschool here, I only spoke Spanish. And of course, I probably knew like my numbers and, colors, little things like that. But for my kids, same thing. I taught them Spanish first. And then when they entered school, they began to acquire English. So it was just important for me to reflect our family's, language journey. And that's kind of a multilingual journey, if you will. We'll express ourselves in one language or another, depending on how we feel, depending on what we want to express. And, particularly with that story, of course, I wanted to have that be something that second and third culture kids, could potentially identify with. Because everyone's, linguistic journey is so varied. And I feel like it's also something that's ever evolving. As a kid, maybe you weren't exposed to it, or your family, only spoke English at home, but now you're an adult and you want to, reclaim that part of you. And so, I just liked being able to express myself in two languages for those reasons.
That's very good reasons. I mean, especially I was paying attention to the fact that your children spoke Spanish first, and you kept it that way until, of course, they went to school. And so many bilingual families do that. And I don't have kids, but I feel like if I did, I would do that too. I think it's wonderful to keep those roots in there, and the language is part of those roots.
Yeah, and it's hard to maintain because unfortunately we don't have the option of dual immersion school. So, it's been a challenge to have them maintain that because, of course, children are going to acquire the language of their peers, whatever that language is.
Yeah.
And so then it's on, the caregivers, if it's the parents, grandparents, aunts, whomever, to have that home language be kind of present, on a daily basis to so that they can hear it and hopefully make some connection with that. So it's definitely not easy, and it's a daily challenge, even for myself. I've tried to maintain my Spanish, but of course, when you go to school here and all your instruction is in English, and it's harder to maintain that. But
Mhm.
it's a goal that we have.
I
Yeah.
grew up that way, I learned Spanish. My parents were immigrants, and I learned Spanish. Spanish was my first language.
Mhm.
English is now my dominant language, but
Yeah.
I do pretty well. I do okay in Spanish. And we went to Sunday school in Spanish, and when I was really young, we lived in a community that was very dominantly Spanish speaking. So I was able to retain a lot of it. But I'm so grateful that my parents
Mm.
did that because um, now I know two languages,
Yeah,
and I'm not really good at. I've tried to learn other languages, but since I don't use them every day, they just kind of fade away.
sure.
So yeah, I think it's awesome.
I totally applaud parents that raise bilingual children because I'm sure it's not as easy as otherwise. So
Mhm.
applaud to your parents,
Yeah,
Alicia, and of course to you, Nydia. Nice.
thanks.
So, was there something about writing for children that surprised you once you became a published author?
Yes, I think probably something that surprises most people, which is that it's not easy to write a book for kids. I think a lot of us, when we are reading to our own kids, or if you're a teacher or whatever, if you have any experience doing, reading picture books or board books or any of those, you think, how hard can this be? It's just,
Gotta be
it's
easy.
a handful of pages. So, it's not like writing a novel, but, there's definitely a method to the madness. And, there is, you got to know about structure and plot and voice and, conveying um, what you want to convey in a very, very short format. And very low word count when it comes to picture books. So
All your
I
words are
think,
precious.
yeah, I think that to me was like, was a surprise. But one that I, was wanting to learn um, how to create. And it's funny because, I'm several books in, but every time I write something new, I feel like it's the first time I'm writing, and, because each project is so different. So it's like, I don't know what I'm doing. Every time I start a new thing, it's like a whole new learning process. So even though you can write, one doesn't mean you can write another. There's a
Mhm.
lot of learning involved.
Well, and while we're at it, tell us about revisions. That's something that often when I meet new writers of children's books, they get surprised by the number of revisions that happen as part of the
Yeah.
process, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's never the draft you turn in, the one that gets acquired. That's not usually how it ends up. I remember the first time I got my editorial letter for my debut book, I was like, oh my gosh, like I can't do this, it's and part of it is that you've worked on that story for so long that in your mind it's like, no, this is the way it's supposed to be. The way I wrote it is the way it's going to publish. And so when you get that letter and you get notes and you're like, no, no, this is all wrong. But of course, they do know better, and they are there to help you make it as great as it can be. So, it's really about taking pause, letting it sink in, stepping away from it, and I just come back and I usually tackle the global edits first, so what tends to be more challenging for me. And then I'll, approach line edits when all that is kind of resolved. But now it's actually something that I enjoy. So I don't really fear it. I understand that it's going to make it better. And of course, there might be items that you don't agree with, and as an author, you have that creative power to say, I actually really feel strongly about this. I'd like to leave that as it is. Are you okay with that? And usually they're like, yeah, if you feel strongly about it, that's fine. But they're definitely there to make it better.
It's a team
That's great.
effort.
And go
Mhm.
ahead.
Oh, no, we're just
Oh,
saying that it's a
oh,
team effort.
oh.
Yeah,
No, it's so great to hear, about the editorial process because there are a lot of writers who haven't been published who don't really know and they're kind of nervous about it or
yeah,
scared to speak up and defend their vision for their own story. And so it's great to hear about that from
yeah,
you, from other authors, to hear like where there's a give and take
yeah. And I
and that
think in the
you're allowed.
beginning, go ahead,
Yeah,
I'm
go ahead.
sorry.
Go ahead. No, that you're allowed to speak up.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that in the beginning, you're more hesitant because you're just thankful, like, oh my gosh, I got a deal. Someone believes in this book, and probably the tendency is to say, kind of agree with all the suggestions and like, oh, the editor knows best, what do I know? This is my first book. They've edited, hundreds, if not maybe thousands of books, and it's probably easy to just kind of go with all the suggestions. But, I think that is part of using your voice, and it's your voice that has written, that particular book, and so that comes with also speaking your truth and letting them know, I wrote this spread with this intention, because a lot of times they don't know what your intention was behind it. So it's okay to explain, this is kind of what I was going for, and maybe you didn't hit it on the head, but with that little bit of background or explanation, the editor might understand where you're coming from, and you might end up, resolving that in an even better way than you had intended or that the editor had suggested. And you might come together and
Yeah.
use, both of your insight, and it ends up being even better. So I know it's a lot about being open, but also um, focusing on what you want as a creator.
So specifically in your book, Not Far From Here, was there something especially difficult or meaningful that led to you writing the book or working out with your editor?
Um, hmm, I don't think so. Oh, I would say that one of the challenges was actually when I was querying the book was that so in this book the mother is the storyteller. She's the one narrating the story. But she narrates the story of how her husband, the children's father, migrated. So there was a lot of resistance initially as to why the mom was the storyteller, the mama was the storyteller versus the papa. And I could have easily just changed the whole thing and had the papa be the storyteller. But I was like, well, why not? Why can't the mama be the one who tells the story? I mean, to me, it was just like a no-brainer because in my mind, I'm narrating our story, so I'm like, well, why can't she be? So there was some resistance there, and when my editor who acquired the book, he was like, well, okay, you want to keep that, so let's just sprinkle in like a little more about the women in the family. And so that kind of helped pull that thread a little bit so that it wasn't just the mama telling the story, and we had a little more about the power and influence of the other female storytellers in the family.
That's really interesting. And we talked a little bit about your book inspired by Frida Kahlo. I'm one of her huge fans as well, as I'm an artist. And so I'm curious, what drew you to her story and her world? Other than I know that you're an artist too, so uh, tell us
Yeah,
more
I
about
would
that.
say that, yeah, she was Latina, she was an artist. As a young girl, I just identified with her, and I just really loved, what she created. And so it wasn't my intention to write a book about her. Like that wasn't at the forefront of my mind, like, oh, I want to write a book about Frida, or it was just something again that happened organically. Um, and I would just say the one thing that I can add that's kind of interesting about this book was that when I wrote it and I showed it to my agent, she's like, well, this is another book about Frida, which, I was well aware that the market was extremely saturated, not only on the adult side, but the kids side. And so, we needed to figure out what was going to set this book apart, that would potentially, make an editor want to buy it. And it was really focusing on the nature aspect of the book. And so initially I had um, the plants and flowers that are in the book. My idea was for the illustrator to just kind of identify those. So it would be more like a very large field guide where you'd be reading the story, but then you could identify the plants and flowers throughout. And the editor's like, you really need to pull this thread. So I need you to like put that into the text. So we, expressly stated the flowers and plants that she painted with, that she, included in her crown, that were in her garden, and that was enough to set it apart. And finally have Abrams, who acquired it, say, yeah, this is different. It's different enough than from what's out there.
And I'm glad you mentioned that because I know a lot of authors, especially in the early stages, have ideas about subjects, topics, or characters, people that many other books have been written before,
Yeah,
and sometimes during the critiques or just conversations or whatever, they might feel like, oh my gosh, well, this has already been done. It has already been done, and it's not the fact that it's already been done that should be the point of focus, but rather how can you make it fresh? How can you make it better? What can you say that hasn't been said about
exactly.
it,
Hmm.
or done, what else can you do with it? And it sounds like you found a lovely way to um, have the story of Frida, uh, which is so popular and so well
Hmm.
known already, but done on a nice, fresh, completely fresh way. So
Yeah,
I
exactly. So don't give up on the idea just because it has been done. Find a way in, find a fresh hook. How can you make it stand out in a very crowded market? And it may or may not, work. It might be timing too. It might be like, oh, well, we just had a book about so and so, maybe in a couple years, and just, keep it on file because you don't know.
Um, in your upcoming book, The Women Before Us, Weaving Stories in My Weep Eating, is it's so beautiful and has such a powerful title. What was the first seed of that story?
So that story, so I'm Guatemalan, that's part of my heritage. And, I've traveled there when I was young. And I've just always had a huge admiration for the art of textile weaving. And it really was my way to honor my heritage. And I have a great great grandmother who was Maya, and it was just a way to um, reclaim that little bit of my heritage. So it's an expression of admiration, I would say. And Dana Sanmar, who's the illustrator on here, she used cut paper art and I believe a combination of digital. So a lot of the scenes really pop off the page because of her technique, and I just think it came together really beautifully. I gotta zoom it a little bit. There we go. Okay, I pick up Mama's weaving sword and feel the women before us, each one a master weaver, guiding the sword and the threads that would pass through the loom. A kaleidoscope of colors wait on the warp, wait to be woven.
That's beautiful. Uh, I know that's still early in the book and we're not going to show more, but I love that particular page, and your words. And I've gotten the privilege of seeing your book, so I'm excited about it, as I'm sure you are too. Um, so, did writing this story teach you anything new about yourself?
Um, Gosh, I think it taught me to ask hard questions. In this case, asking about one's family history. It's very interesting because I didn't think it would be so challenging, but because of I think the differences in generations as well as cultures, I found that family members aren't as open to talking about um, other family members with indigenous roots. And I think many people can relate to that. There may be family trauma. It might be due to institutionalized colonialism. So it's been interesting and challenging in that way, but I can only say that um, I feel honored to just have, like I say in the author's note, that little thread that connects me to my great great abuelita. So yeah, I think it's if you have family that's open, ask the questions. You might not, and you can still ask them anyway, but just kind of be prepared for the responses. And it's very layered, and yeah, it's been interesting.
Yeah, I feel like when, as a writer, I'm not an artist, but as a writer, I feel like everything that I write teaches me a little bit more about myself because I have to dig into my own experiences and what I think about things. And so I feel like everything you write, or I'm sure as an artist too, everything you draw or paint teaches you something new about yourself. And that's the great thing about art. That's what it's about. That's what it's all about, discovery and self-awareness and sharing, what we all have in common. So,
Mm,
or what
Always
you know
learning.
about.
You're always
Yeah.
learning when you're an artist, and writing, of course, is an art. So.
yeah.
Okay, so what do you hope young readers, especially those from immigrant or multicultural backgrounds, feel when they read this story or any of your stories?
Yeah, I think I hope it makes them feel something. I hope it helps them ask the questions about either their family history, where they come from, that it helps um, build that sense of self and spark curiosity, I guess, about their own life, about other cultures. Um, Yeah, I think that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Well, and as the book releases on August 11, what conversations are you most excited to have with readers? And what's for you next?
Yeah, I think probably what we just touched on, I think really encapsulates what I hope. I hope they um, discover a little more about Guatemala, which doesn't isn't a country that's written about often, or it's not the setting in a lot of picture books. So I hope that it resonates with Guatemalan families, Latine families, and other families who are curious about culture, and that they perhaps look into the arts weaving. It's like so beautiful, and all the symbols that are woven, which we just touch on, just a little handful in the book. So perhaps it'll spark some curiosity there. And what's next for me is that, well, the book, The Women Before Us, Weaving Stories in My Huipil, that's out in August, and it'll also be a simultaneous release in Spanish. And the title is Nuestras Ancestras Tejiendo Historias en Mi Huipil. I had the pleasure of translating that, so that's really exciting. And then next year, I have a book with Orchard Scholastic, also set in Guatemala, called Vroom Vroom Vámonos. And it follows the story of a retired school bus who is driven to Guatemala and turned into a passenger bus, also known as a chicken bus by many tourists, camioneta burra, and talks about his new life in Guatemala
It
and
reminds me of La Chiva Colombiana.
yeah. Yeah, and then another book releasing also next year, hopefully in the fall, called Desert Cantos, the story of Linda Ronstadt. That's with Abrams. And I just found out that will also be releasing in Spanish, hopefully simultaneous, but I'm not sure yet.
Yay.
Yeah, so that's pretty
Are you
exciting.
translating that one too?
Yeah, I am, yes. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, congratulations. That's
Thank
exciting.
you. Yeah.
You're busy.
Yes. Busy. So I'm not working on anything new. Right now I got
I
enough.
think you got your hands
Yeah.
full
Yeah.
and with the wonderful projects. Looking forward to seeing those come to the world.
Thank you.
Well, this brings us to the end of our time with you. Time flies when you're having fun.
Yes.
We have concluded the official portion of our episode, but we do have three questions that we ask of every single guest. And these are meant to be just fun questions, just answer whatever comes to mind first. It's for people to get to know you a little more on a personal level. So 30 seconds, 90 seconds at most, just keep it fast. We call them rapid fire questions. And here's the
Okay.
first one. What's one fact about you that even your biggest fans might not know?
Ooh, that I know a tongue twister that I learned in like fourth grade by heart.
Oh,
I
I
don't
want
even
to
know the
hear that.
title of it, but it's called Betty bought some butter, and I can do it really well and really fast.
Oh, wow. Is it long? Is it short?
It's long.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I want to hear the first part.
I'll do the first part. Betty bought some butter, but she said the butter's bitter. It's a very much a tongue twister.
That is amazing.
Okay, the next question, rapid fire question, is if others were to describe you in one, two, or three words, what would those be?
Hmm. Goofy. Um, hmm. Impatient. I'm impatient. I know this about myself. And mm, considerate.
Hmm, lovely. Well, and what book or books have had the most impact in your life?
So, a book that I also read right before the pandemic, which was influential in me taking the step towards looking at what it took to become an author, was called Maybe by Kobe Yamada. And just talks about kind of discovering your true potential. And it was a picture book.
Oh, that sounds lovely. I'm gonna have to put it on my list.
It's a
My
really
little
good one.
stash of old books every single week. How many books do you read a week? Picture books.
Me, oof, when I have time, maybe like 2 to 3. Yeah.
Fabulous. Wonderful. All right. Well, that was an unofficial question. That concludes our episode. So this was fun. Thank you so much for being with us, Alicia, and Nydia. I hope you both have a happy rest of your day. We are missing Sylvia, but she'll be back with us soon. So,
All right. Thank you so
adios.
much.
Bye.
Adios. Bye bye.